delayed right now. And in Meetup, you can see it has to be because of the weather. But as of about a week ago, there were like 120 people registered for this meeting, and it's down to 88. And I think the number is dropping by the minute. So once again, Tony and I probably bought too much food, but you know, such as that. Other things going on. Of course, we had our monthly meeting last month. Went pretty well. And that was the future of C# and a first look at Blazor. Chris Gomez did that one. So I think that went over pretty well. But the main thing you have to know is that all of our meetings now for the last 6 months are all streamed live and recorded. Ooh. So if you want to go to the recording, there's a link to go to the Mixer page. I think there's a link. So if people are out in the live audience, you do not have it here, no.
So it's just mixer.com.
Yeah, I'll run it up here.
Mixer.com/Philly.net. I'll spell it out.
So they all spell out. Okay, so the live stream is actually at this address. And of course, Mixer is the service that Microsoft has, primarily used by gamers. Uh-oh. Oh, God. We better turn this off. Yes, the live stream is there, and it's going to keep talking. You can see that it's a little delayed.
Infinite regression.
I sound really evil when I'm like that. All right, so not a live stream, but Rich actually takes all the recordings and posts them to youtube.com/Philly.net. Of course, you spell it out, D-O-T-N-E-T. Yes.
Could you use that technology to ask yourself questions?
You could, and it would make a real good like Twilight Zone or Night Gallery episode, but. Anyways, so many kudos to Rich Ross and Chris Gomez for doing all the recording. It's a lot of value. And if you go through these, you'll see like the meeting last month with Scott K and Chris Gomez have already had 176 views, which is a lot more people than we got to attend here live. And the YouTube are views after the fact. And that's in addition to the 20 or 30 people that actually are watching this right now live. And that's why the room is sort of empty today, other than it's 90 degrees outside.
First time this year.
For the first time this year, yes. So, anyways, that's our biggest change in Philly.net, and that's running well, so hopefully you'll get value out of that. We have, tonight we're going to go over Razor Pages. In 2 weeks, I didn't post the meeting yet to Meetup, but in 2 weeks we have a meeting in here on the, let's see, what is today? Today's the 2nd?
Yes.
So on the 16th, there is a meeting in here, and it's all about blockchain. And they're also going to show you how to do some programming in C# for blockchain. So if you want to learn how the world of blockchain and Bitcoin work, that might be fun for you. The first Wednesday in June, we'll have another lab continuing in the ASP.NET series, and we're going to do Web API that evening. So that's going to be, well, you'll be here for that one. That'll be good. And then the monthly meeting in June, which is, I think, the 20th? It's a Wednesday. That is our popular Kids Can Code night. So you should pay attention for that. If you have children, you know, even, you know, grade school up through high school, bring them. And we will have sessions. We're going to split the 2 rooms and have different age groups and have presentations for kids and ice cream and cake and fun stuff like that. So, all right. So to track what's going on in Philly.net, again, you go to YouTube, you go to Meetup, or you can go to the old-fashioned Philly.net WordPress site, which is, it's still working. I don't keep this up to date as much. So it says here that our monthly hands-on lab was React, Angular versus Vue. That was like 2 or 3 months ago. So I don't keep this up to date as much as the Meetup site, but this is going to be replaced soon. So enjoy it while you can. Basically, the main purpose this serves is to run our code camps, and hopefully you did make it to code camp in March, and we had a pretty successful event. Had about 450 plus people show up, and it worked out pretty well. So how many went to code camp? Okay, well, the rest of you should show up when we do another one. So our next code camp right now is scheduled for early next year, probably January, March timeframe. And I am actually doing a project separate from Philly.net. I'm running a conference. This is called Philly Tech 365. And if you never saw it from above, oh, that's me. I'm big. But if you never saw the university from above, that's actually Villanova University.
Yay.
But we're running a conference at Villanova University in the end of July, and you wouldn't believe all the speakers we have lined up for this. It's sort of like the code camps that I do here, but we have like 3 times as many speakers, and some of the speakers are coming from other countries. So it's pretty significant. Billy Hollis is really famous for doing UI design work, XAML, things like that. Magnus Martinson, did anybody attend Global Azure Bootcamp? Do you know what that is? So that like they're worldwide, there were 280 groups that all had a meeting on one day. And he's the guy that runs that. So he is from Sweden. And her Czech, he is, I think, what are the Slavias? Czech? No, they don't have that one anymore.
No.
They don't have Yugoslavia. What are those Slavias?
Slovenia.
I don't know. Anyways, if you go in here and go to all speakers, you can actually see I have about 55 speakers confirmed, and of those 55, 40 of them are either MVPs or Microsoft employees. So we have quite a lineup, and take a look at that if you have a chance. This one is not free.
No, I don't think so.
So, all right. So, any questions about what's going on with the club or the? Not a thing. Okay. Well, in that case, I will turn it over to Rob Kaiser, and he's going to get you started. And everybody, do me a favor right now. We'll all say this together. Rob, slow down. Okay, everybody say it.
Rob, slow down.
Okay, because he gets really excited when he like tries to show technology, and he like goes too fast. So,
Bill just needs to speed up his ears.
well, yes and no.
All right. See if I can. Okay. Everybody hear me fine? Yeah?
Yep.
Good. Wonderful. Did you all download the things you're supposed to download from the meeting page?
No.
Please do so now. And then there's this last thing down here. We are trying something with GitHub, which you don't need right away, but you should probably, so let's just go through this real quick. There's this project on GitHub, and yes. All right.
Okay.
So there's this project. We're trying this out, see if this works. There, if you go to this project, there are two branches. There's a master branch and a works with SQLite branch. We are going to use both those branches at some time tonight, but not right away. So what you probably want to do is you want to go to the clone or download and download the zip for each of the branches. And let me know if anybody can't get to this, because we're trying this out for the first time. So it's at github.com/philly.net spelled out. And right now it's the only repository in there. And yes, I misspelled the name, and there should be a 2 at the end of that 50, so that was my fault. So that's that. So tonight, like last time, we're going to do everything with Visual Studio Code. That way everybody can follow along, whether you've got Windows or Linux or a Mac. It should all work just fine. In the README, by the way, in the README file is the link to the tutorial we're going to do. So if you go to this GitHub repository and go to the master branch and read the README file, that's the link. Okay, so I will wait for that. And who was here last time for the last one? Yes? Okay, so just to give those people a little heads up, this is a very similar project, except instead of using MVC, we're going to use Razor Pages. So if you were here last time, you can see the differences between the two. The reason why I'm using the GitHub repository is so that you guys don't have to play with the Entity Framework stuff, because that makes Bill happy if we don't play with Entity Framework. So that's what that's for. So what it does is the first one just sets it up right after creating the database. Second one is a little bit farther along after you do the seed data. For those who were here last time, that's what that's going. All right. So how we doing? Everybody up to speed? They got the you know what the URL is for the tutorial? Okay.
No, this is special.
Oh, it's down there. Okay. All right. I'm going to minimize this now, so hopefully everybody's got that. So this is the tutorial page. You can search for it if you didn't get that URL. That's fine. It's just getting started with ASP.NET Core, Razor Pages, and Visual Studio Code. That's what we're doing. So the first thing we want to do is create a directory someplace where we can put our code. So is everybody happy with PowerShell? You can use the command line too if you don't like PowerShell. I created a directory called PDN-HOL, and I'm going to put my project inside this directory. So bring up a command line or PowerShell and create a directory and go to that directory. So let's start there. So what we're going to do next is there are some commands here. I move my mouse to the right place. There it is. So these three commands we're going to run. Now you can run them, you can try running them all at once. I don't know how well it'll work depending on what you're using for your console. Or you can just type them in by hand. It's really not that tough. So the first command will create a Razor application. second command, changes that directory, and the third one will run it. Okay, so that's all we're going to do. So this is all using the .NET command. So for those who are familiar with that, that's all we're doing. Okay, so let's give that a shot. So it's .NET new Razor spelling counts. O is the output directory. And that's all you have to type in. And then hit enter. Okay. So when you do hit enter, excuse me, it goes out and it says, okay, I know what we're doing. We're creating a ASP.NET Core web app, and we're going to go create the directory structure and everything else. And then the next thing it does, and this is new for the latest version of .NET Core, it runs a .NET restore automatically. And if you want to do a directory, you can see that a directory got created called Razor Pages Movie, which is what we said was the output directory. And we can switch that directory and take a look at what's inside there.
So could you tell them where the .NET command comes from?
You mean where
It's yellow. It's on the
The
second line.
.NET.
yes.
Yeah.
It's the command that is from when you download the SDK and all the other .NET framework stuff, the .NET Core stuff, that comes down with it. And that's the .NET command. So it's just like the node command for node, that kind of stuff. Same thing. So doing a quick directory of what's in here, and you can see, if I just clear that, do another directory. It creates the a pages folder, a www root folder. It's got a bunch of JSON files it created. It's got a program.cs, which is always in there when you have an ASP.NET Core application, and it's got a startup.cs, which is also almost always there when you create a ASP.NET Core project. And there's also the CS proj file. There's no solution file here on this one because we're not using Visual Studio. We're just using Visual Studio Code. So if we want to run this just to see if it actually works, which it should. So if you type in .NET run, what should happen is it should start up Kestrel and get things listening, and hopefully on one of these screens it's going to show up on a. I had this problem before.
I had to go to that.
Yeah. So I've had the problem before. Apparently, on the initial load of this, on occasion, it doesn't want to actually start up. But you can just open up a web browser, and in a second I'll show you how you. So we look here inside that command line. It says now listening on HTTP localhost 5000. So by default, that's the place that it's going to listen for requests. So if you browse to that URL, you should get the application coming up. So if we do that, localhost 5000, you get the standard ASP.NET Core website, the one that everybody sees all the time whenever they're starting up a new project. Doesn't do very much. It's got a couple navigation things down here, and it's got some other nice little carousel going and some other stuff. It's typical stuff. Nothing fancy. All right, so we can stop this. You can see right here, it says application started. Press Control-C to shut down. So let's press Control-C. And it should shut down your application. Okay, now let's open up Visual Studio Code and take a look at the application from that perspective, so we can just browse through some of the what's all included in it. So the easiest way to get to Visual Studio Code is just to type code space dot from the directory that you want to load code from. Now, how many people here are pretty familiar with Visual Studio Code? How many people are not too familiar with Visual Studio Code? Okay. The thing that the primary thing that took me a while to understand about Visual Studio Code when they first came out with it is that it's based on directories. It's not really a file editor, it's a directory structure type editor, right?
Oh no, there's lights behind the screen.
I know, there are. Oh, silly mic's on. But now they're not. All right, so by doing this, you say, open up code at this directory and give me everything that's inside the directory. So there is my Visual Studio Code. Let me just maximize this. Okay, now, what you should see when you do this is it says required assets to build and debug are missing from my project. Do I want to add them? Now, this is assuming that you actually loaded up all the correct stuff from the meetup page. And if you didn't, you may not get this message. And you should go for this one. Yeah, there is. I don't know about this one, but hang on, I'll get there. Let's go to settings. Well, first, if you get this, say yes. So let me just accept that first. And I'll go to preferences. Font size. How's that? It's not going to change this one, but there you go. Okay, so let's take a look at what we have in the project. So on the left-hand side, we have all the files that are part of the project. And how many people here are MVC, do mostly MVC work? Okay. And how many people here do web forms work? A few of you. Okay. I know they want a minute. That's okay. So what's missing from this list of directories for the MVC people? The biggest thing that you work with is controller, right? Second biggest thing is view. Both those things are not here, okay, because this is a Razor Pages application. So the important thing here is the Pages directory. So if we open up the Pages directory, we can take a look and see what's inside there. So some of the stuff looks very familiar to what you've seen in the MVC stuff for View, because MVC uses Razor Pages also. It's just a different type of Razor page, right? So if we go through this, you can see that it's got the typical layout page that's out here that gets used, right? And there's a view start page that tells it what layout page to use, just like in MVC. And there's a view import. So those are the three things that are probably pretty much the same thing that you're used to on MVC applications, MVC websites. I don't remember if validation script partial is there or not. I can never remember that one. But this is the one that says that lets you do the validation within the application. So if they type in like they don't put a correct date in, it'll give them a message. Or if they don't put something in that's required, it'll give them a message. That's where this stuff's for. That's where this stuff's from. Okay. Then there's a bunch of other CS/HTML files here that are the standard, you know, the same thing you would have seen in the view directory for MVC, right? The other thing that's in here that's different are all these CS files. So the about CS, the contact CS, the error CS, the index CS, HTML CS. Okay, these are all the different things, and these are for the people who do web forms, this should look fairly familiar to you because this is like a code behind file, right? So this is the file that runs that's associated with that web page, that CSHTML file. So find out where your mouse is on the right screen. Okay. And now we've already run it once, but we can run this again just so that everybody understands how we run things inside of Visual Studio Code. There is a debug menu at the top here. It says Start Debugging is F5. That should be familiar to most of you. Start Without Debugging is Control F5. That should also be pretty familiar to most of you. So if we just do a Control F5 just to start this up and get it running. And it should look just like we did because we haven't changed anything. We're just running it from within Visual Studio Code. So how are we doing? Everybody up to this point? Following along? Anybody have any questions? Anybody have any answers? Okay. All right. So we can close that down. And we can go back to our application, or our Visual Studio Code rather. And at the top, for those who are not familiar with Visual Studio Code, that is where the little menu is for doing debugging and to stop and start and restart and that kind of stuff. So if you notice, even though we closed down the page in the browser, it still didn't stop it from running. So you got to click on that to stop it, and then it stops it. Okay. All right, so if you're following along with the tutorial, we are done with the getting started with Razor Pages. And we're moving on to add a model. And with most things, it's not very useful without having the model and stuff like that as part of the application. So you can either follow along with that and do what it says, or you can go to the zip file that you downloaded from GitHub and get the master one and replace everything we just did with that. So let's do that. See how that works out. So close down Visual Studio Code. I have it open a couple places here. Let's make sure that's closed down. Okay. Go back to the GitHub. And I'm just going to download a zip file and save it someplace. I'm going to open that folder up. Gee, I've done it so many times here now. I've got multiple copies of it, but that's okay. So there is a zip file. It's got it's got the repository name -master because that's the branch we're working with. Open that up, and it's got a folder inside there, and open that up, and that's all the code. So that should all look familiar to you because that's what we just did. It's got a couple extra things in here, which we'll go over in a second. So everybody get this far? Yes, yes, yes. All right, all right. So I have, let me just go back to I wish I knew which direction I was supposed to move this. There we go. Okay. So let me go back to, yeah, that's where I wanted to go. So this is where I've currently got my stuff. I'm just going to show you that's where everything is. Right. I want to get rid of all this stuff because I'm not going to use it anymore. And it might be easier to work with this way. It's probably easier to work from the file manager. So everybody know that the easiest way to get there from a directory you're in is just type start dot. How you do. So this is the directory I was just working in. So I'm just going to get rid of all this stuff. You can either put it in a different directory, or you can do what I'm doing. It's up to you. If you want to keep the stuff, that's fine. If not, don't worry about it. And yes, I want to get rid of all those things. And now, I want to come back over to my, where'd you go? This is the downloaded file I got from GitHub. I'm just going to do a Control A on all this stuff and copy it and paste it into my directory that I was just working on. And there it is. And now you have it on your machine. Everybody okay so far? All right. So if I do a directory here again, I should have everything there, and it is all there. Isn't that wonderful? Now, before you open up and go into code, please do a .NET restore from here, because it'll save you a little bit of grief. So what this is going to do is going to go through the CS proj file, look through all the stuff there, and say, okay, I know what I have to get. It's just doing the same thing a NuGet would do, or any of the other restore packages for Node or anything else would work, how they would work. Same idea. Okay. How are we doing? We all set? Yes, yes. Everybody still working? I see a lot of blank stares over on this side. Okay, all right. All right, now do a code dot. So bring it back in here. And we have a few extra things here. So first things we've got, and this is not important to Razor Pages, but I'm just going to show it to you so that you know what's going on and what I did. We've got this mvcmovie.db file sitting out here. Okay. We've got migrations up here. This is the entity framework stuff that took a long time last time we were playing with this, and no, you've just got it. And I have a models directory with a movies model and a movies context. I also modified the startup.cs file so that we are using SQLite, and that's for this setup right here with our movie context. Okay. So that's in the startup.cs file. Okay. And this should run, but we're not going to run it right this second, because it's going to look exactly the same way it looked before. There's not going to be any differences about it. All right, so go back to the tutorial now, assuming you've gotten this far. I am going to assume you've gotten this far. And if we go to the add a model, this is what we just did without having to do it. Okay, set up this model, added this to the models. This is the context. We did make a change to the app settings JSON file as well. I assume we better double check that. Let's double check that just to make sure that that is there. App settings, JSON. There it is. Okay, so that was done too. Yes, wonderful. This is in the startup. Okay. All right. And then the other thing we did was we had to make a change to the CSproj file. And this is so we can do some, this is so that the entity framework stuff would work. And then you magically ran these commands, .NET add package, .NET restore, .NET EF migrations, .NET EF database upgrade. If you feel like you have to do this stuff, go right ahead. You can take the original project before you deleted it, assuming you have it saved someplace, or you can start from scratch. You can run through this. It all works just fine. It just takes a while. So that's where we're at. Now, let's move on to something that's a little more interesting. We're going to scaffold the movie model. So what that means is we're going to create a bunch of files that'll allow us to do create, update, deletes, edits to our movie database, which is the thing we just created. Okay. So how many people here are on Mac or Linux right now? Anybody? Okay. There is the second line is for the Mac and for the Linux people. Okay. Don't run the first line. For everybody else, you can run the first line. So copy this line. Just hit the copy button there. And go back to Visual Studio Code. And down at the bottom, you should have a terminal window available to you. If you do not have a terminal window available to you, you can open up a terminal window by hitting the Control and the backtick, which is underneath the tilde button. We'll open up one for you. There's another way I can never remember where it is in the menu. Anybody remember where it is in the menu? All right. Oh, it's in there somewhere. Control P will get you to the top, and then you can type terminal. But that's Control tick is the easiest way to get there. Everybody open up a terminal window? Yes. Paste in that command. So what does that command do? Well, for this one, which looks a little different than the other one, I admit, they're pretty much the same thing. And I don't know why they want you to do two different ones, but they do. I'm sure there's a different something there somewhere. Anyway, what it's doing is running a .NET command. It's running a code generator portion of .NET. We're specifying that it's a Razor page code generation. The model, that's the -M, is the movie model, which we looked at a second ago. The context is the movie context. So it has to know all this stuff so it knows how to write the code. The UDL is for the layout. It's the use standard layout. And the out directory is where we're going to put all this stuff. And then that last little bit is to specify that we want to have the error checking JavaScript reference stuff put in place. Okay. So before you run this, if you go up and open up your pages folder on the left-hand side there, you'll see that there's just the stuff we had in there before. What this is going to do is it's going to create a new directory called movies, and put all this stuff inside that directory. So if we run this by hitting enter, and yes, it builds the project so it knows everything that's going on, so it makes sure it has all the pieces it needs. And it goes through and it creates that directory, adds a bunch of pages, and that's pretty much it. Everybody okay? If not, you can catch up in a little bit when we get the next version, next stuff from the GitHub stuff. But let's take a look inside here. So what did it create? It created a create, a delete, a details page, an edit page, and an index page underneath the movies folder. So if you open up your movies folder under pages, that's what you should get. Let's run this and see what happens. So I'm going to do Control F5, start it up. And because we don't have any menus or any menus to get us there easily, it's just movies in the URL. So you type in movies at the end of the URL, hit enter, and you should get an index page with nothing in it, which is fine. That's what it should do. Everybody get this far? Yes? And the reason I'm asking is because if you got this far, that means you got the database set up correctly, you know, everything came down from GitHub, everything's working the way it's supposed to. All right? So we can hit create new if you want to. You can create a new movie. If you put something in here, I think they say to use Conan, I don't know. This hopefully gives you this kind of drop down thing. I'm just going to use today's date. And it's a stupid drop down in my opinion because you have to select it, you have to go down to the bottom and hit the check mark. We'll say it's fantasy and you know it's $1.99. I don't know. And you can create it. There it is. I hear lots of clicking of mice. Any questions so far? Everybody okay? Yes, good, wonderful. If you get this far, you can see that there are these links over here, edit, delete, or details and delete. If you click on any of those, they should come up with stuff. You know, it's pretty straightforward stuff. You can edit things. You can do all sorts of stuff like that, right? All right, let's go back to the code and take a look and see what it actually built when we did the scaffolding. So make sure you stop the application running. And I say that only because you don't know how many times I've tried to rerun this thing when it's already running, and I say, why didn't my changes show up? Changes didn't show up because it didn't really run it again. It just ran the last one. All right, so let's go back to, where are you? There you are, okay. Let's go back and start looking through some of this stuff. Let's look at the index CS file, index.cshtml file. I'll get rid of some of this stuff here because you don't need to see that. So there's not too much to this. Okay. What you can see is at the top, we've got this context that we set up, and that's for the database side of things, right? So this is a private read-only variable. And then we have this, when we instantiate the class, we pass in the context. So this is the dependency injection that's built into .NET Core. This is how it works. And then what we're doing is we're taking that context that we pass in and assigning it to our private context variable. We've got a public list called movie, okay, and we have an onGetAsync. So when we call this page, you know, the default HTTP verb is get, right? So that's where it's going to run this onGetAsync. And we're going to return a task. Now, all this does is it goes out to the database and says, get me all the movies that you have in your database and stick it in the movie property, public property that we have set up. Okay. That's all it's doing. It's not returning a page. It's not returning anything, actually, if you can see, because it's an async call. Where are you? Okay. Yes. Well, Razor Pages are used in both MVC and in Razor Pages, and also Blazor when we finally get to that later in the year. Right? They're all using Razor Pages. That's the standard way now to do this stuff. If you're going to do everything inside of without using anything like React or Vue or any of those other ones, this is what you would be using, is these Razor Pages for doing all your HTML pages. Okay. So there's an engine that sits back that when a page is requested, it runs it through the engine first, which changes it all to real HTML and then passes it on down to the user. That's really what's happening in the background. You mean MVC view model stuff? It's different in the way the plumbing works, but you end up with the same output. I mean, it's essentially just a different way to accomplish similar things. It's not as structured as MVC is, right? This is not, right? There's no controller here, right? Which is where everything happens in an MVC, right? Everything's sort of self-contained in that controller piece. No controllers. and I'm sure there's questions that are springing to mind, but that's, just no controllers. All right, so let's take a look. Everybody understand what's going on here? It's pretty straightforward. Any questions? Any other questions about what's going on here? Okay, so let's take a look then at the index .cs.html file. So these two, because they have the same name, it understands that they work together, right? So this is straight, Razor Pages, no MVC stuff going on. But it looks very much like the same stuff. So this page is saying, it's a Razor page. And how many people are familiar with Razor at all? So they understand how many people are not familiar with Razor that way. Okay, so the way Razor works is there are Razor directives, there's HTML, and there's C#, right? Those are the three things you can have inside of a Razor page. If it starts with an @ sign, it says, I'm either going to give you a Razor directive or I'm going to give you a C# line of code or a bunch of lines of code. So that page is a Razor directive, so it understands that. Everything else is HTML. So the second line, whoa, what happened? So the second line is telling the page what model to use. Now this is using the entire index model class. If we go back to the let's just say we're going to keep this one open. Where is it? Keep open. There it is. Okay. So we go back to this. Notice the class is called index model. It's also derived from page model, right? It's not a controller. Again, forget about the controller stuff for this one. So in the index page, we tell it this is the model this is the model we want to use, which is the entire class of the code behind. Right? This here, these lines say I'm going to start something, and in this case, I'm going to run some C# code because that's the angle brackets or the curly brackets rather, and I'm going to specify a view data, which is just a dictionary that we can use to pass data around. And in this case, I'm assigning the title to index, or index to the title inside the dictionary. Now, most of the rest of the stuff is HTML with a mix of some other things, but the interesting things that you'll look at is you'll see things that don't quite look like regular HTML, and that's because Razor Pages rely heavily on tag helpers. Okay. So a tag helper is either its own thing, its own tag type, right? So you can create your own, call it whatever you want, or it extends existing tags. So in this case, we're extending the anchor tag to say to have ASP page stuff put on there and some other things. Okay. And if you look through this, it's pretty straightforward. We're creating a table. We're saying go out and I want to create a header and I want to go out and grab the title from the model. Now this isn't the title value. This is the title variable, the property from the class, right? So it's going to display title. In this case, you're going to see title, release date, genre, and price. And the reason why it's going to display all that is because we haven't told it to display anything different inside of our model. And if we go down a little farther, we can see that we have a for each loop. We're creating the TR body portion here, right? And we're going to pass in the values for title, release date, genre, and price. And we're also going to throw out a bunch of links at the end. We'll come back to these links in a little bit, but that's basically all that's happening. So if we run this, again, just take a look at it. And we go to the movies page. And we do a view source, or yes, okay, fine. Be that way. F12. Can I do a view source now? Yes, view source a little easier. I don't use this machine very much, so I apologize for how it looks at the moment. Okay. And we scroll down a little bit. You can see here's the table that gets created. There's the headers. And then as we go down, we've got the body with all the different pieces to it and the tags at the end. So that's all it's doing. It's just running through a for each loop, grabbing everything in our movies table from the database and displaying the details about it. Okay, so any questions about that so far? No? Good. All right. Now let's go back to GitHub and grab the next piece to it so we can continue on. So stop this from running if you're running something. So this time, what I want you to do is, there's this branch drop down here from GitHub. And I want you to select work with SQLite. So everybody see that? So click on that. And it should change to that branch. That work for everybody? Clone that by getting another zip, download another zip for this one. Now this one, for those who are not running on Windows, let me know if you run into problems with this. When you download the zip, save it someplace. Open it up. And it should look very similar to the other one. It's just got a different name. It's got a couple extra files, but that's okay. I just made a couple other changes, mostly to the database, and I'll explain what I did in just a moment. Okay. Not that one. That's my compressed one. That's the one I want. Okay. So again, I'm going to delete everything from make sure you stop everything first. Okay. See if I can get it this time. And I'm going to copy all this stuff, however you want to do it, into the same directory. Again, if you want to use a different directory, you can. Make sure I get the right one. Yes, I do. Okay. All right. Everybody okay? Yes, yes, yes. Any problems? I'll leave these up too in case anybody wants to. I mean, I'm not going to get rid of them. So if you want to come back and grab them some other time. Or if you're adventurous, you can follow through the tutorial directly and do everything it says to do. And you'll end up in the same place, hopefully. Okay. Again, before we open up code, just to be complete, do a .NET restore to make sure that we have everything up to snuff. We all set? Yes, yes, yes. Shaking heads are good things. Okay, open up code again. And we'll go over what I changed this time. So the real big difference here is I added the seed data stuff. This all it does is just seed the database with some stuff. So it really doesn't really have any effect on the Razor pages themselves. It's just a bunch of data in the database. So what got modified was the seed data got added in, and I modified the programs file so that it would run that seed data piece. Okay. That's pretty much it. There might be a few other things here and there. I did make a few changes to the layout, but that's inconsequential. I just did whatever was in the tutorial, so you know it should be in the same place. Everybody should be in the right spot for that. Okay, so that is, I believe that take us all the way through the work with SQLite step. So let me just zip over here for a second. See this where it says work with SQLite? We just accomplished that step, which is nothing more than just seeding the database, which takes a lot longer than reading the instructions take. So. And that's where a lot of people got lost last time we were working with this. So we are up to the update the generated pages. So any questions so far? We're doing okay? So if we run this, so Control F5, and it should run for you guys. And if it doesn't, let me know, or let somebody know. I'm mostly interested in the Mac and the Linux guys if they can get it to run. And of course, I put it on the other page, so let me just move that over here. Oh, take it. Good. Excellent. That was my only concern. I wasn't sure about you guys. All right, so if we go to the movies folder, or movies URL again, you should see a few more things now. Hopefully you see these things. Yes? Good. Yay. Is that a little easier than last time, for those who were here last time? Okay. So, earlier I said when it's going through and it's pulling out the headings for this stuff, it just goes in and looks at the model and it pulls out whatever the properties are called inside the model. But we can change that by adding some things to the model. So if we stop this, or just go back to our code and go into the models folder and go into movie.cs. Now for release date, we want it to look a little nicer, right? So right here, what we want to do is we want to add some data annotations to it. That's with square brackets. This should be pretty, for everybody who's done this before, it should look pretty much the same as what they're used to. Okay. And notice I get some red squiggles there because it doesn't have the data annotations yet. So you can either type it in by hand, or if you just put the cursor over top of the word display and click on it, you should get a little light bulb on the left-hand side. I'll wait till you guys are done. Make sure you type that in. We all caught up? So when you go over to the light bulb and click, it will say, here are the things you can do to fix it. Just pick the first one, which is using system component model.data annotations, and it just sticks it up at the top. If you don't get that, or you can't get that to work, just type in that using clause up here, this one. This using clause, to add your data annotation parts to it. So what this is going to do is when it goes through that loop and it says, tell me what I should put in here, it's going to use this display name instead of the actual name. Okay. The other thing we want to do is that date is we're displaying a date time because the field is a date time field, so it's going to display both. But we don't really need both. So we can change the data type that the Razor page will use. And to do that, you just put in here data type. And the data type we want to put in is data type dot date. You probably could, but I wouldn't play with that just yet. Okay, so it should look like this now. So all we do is just add these two lines, right? Now we don't have to do anything to the page itself because we told the page go out and look at the model and go out and get the data from the model. Get the column name from the model, and we're going to use that to help us do the display type as well. And the reason that works is because of, let's go to the pages real quick, look at that index CSHTML page. We've got this little helper here that says display for. So what that's doing is going out and saying, check the model, see what's in it, and use that to help you decide how you're going to display this information. That's where it's going to pick up that data type of date. So we didn't have to make any changes to the code at the CSHTML files. That stuff's all handled for us. We just have to change the model, and it's automatically updated inside the CSHTML when we display it. So make sure you save this, Control S to make sure you save the file. And if we run it, we should see, Control F5, remember? It's going to run for me. Also, if I close that down first, wouldn't it? Try again. And there it goes. Okay. Again, get to that movies page. And we should see that release date is now 2 words, not 1 word. And the date is only showing the date and not the date time. The field is only showing the date, not the date time, right? Okay. All right, so now let's take a look at these links over here. So we already played with this a little bit earlier, but let's take a little more detailed look at this. So if we hover over the edit, if you look down at the bottom of the page, wherever your link is showing up, mine is at the bottom of the page, it has the URL/edit !ID equals and the ID number, right? And if we do so that's because of that little helper tag that we have in there that sets up all those links. All those URL links. So that's what's happening. But you know, we could make that look a little nicer if we wanted to. Rather than have that question mark in there and some other stuff, there are other ways we could handle that. But before we do go to that, I just want to make sure everybody sees what's going on here. So I am going to look at the view source, so you don't have to if you don't want to. But if we go down here, each one of these shows the links. So this is edit !ID equals 1. This one's edit !ID equals 2, etc. So there's one for each of these sections in here. All right. Just to prove that that's how it looks on all of that stuff. So let's close this for a second and stop running. Okay. And I want to open up the index page again and go down to the bottom where it's setting up those links. So find that index CSHTML page over here under pages, under movies, and click on that. And if you notice in here, it's not specifying the exact URL we saw, right? It's using a tag helper to set it up for us. So it knows what page it's supposed to go to, which is the .edit part for this one, and it knows the route ID it needs. Okay. And because it knows about the page that this is referring to, the edit page, it knows how it has to pass that ID into it. Okay, so that's why it puts that ID $ID equals and the number on it. But we can make this look all nice. So let's go look at the edit CSHTML CS file first. Take a look there. So that's right above it, right there. And just a quick look down here on the onGetAsync. See, that's where it's got that int $ID in there. Okay, so it looks at that and says, okay, I know how to pass an ID to this guy. I can do this, and it does it. Sets it all up. Now, if we go to the edit.cshtml page, the actual the CSHTML, the Razor page, they made that way too long with CSHTML. You go to the Razor page, at the top, I mentioned that page directive earlier. Top of the page. We can modify this, and we can make it look like it's part of the route, or we can add it to the route, essentially, what we're doing. So how do we do that? Well, all you have to do is put in ID, because that's what we want to pass into it. And we want to specify that it is an int. And it's inside the quotes, and inside the quotes are curly braces, and inside the curly braces are the ID:int. Okay. Make sure you put the quotes around it. Without the quotes, it won't work. I know, because I've tried. So we've modified that, and let's save it. We're only going to modify the one for right now. Everybody up this far? Yes, yes, good. So run this. And go to that movies location again. List of movies. And now, if we hover over the edit and you look down the bottom left, it doesn't have the ID, $ID equals anymore, right? It's just got the ID in it. All we had to do was make one change to the CSHTML file and adding that route in there. So how does this work? Why didn't we have to change anything else? Because those tag helpers look and say, oh, you want the ID this way. So we can do that. So we didn't have to make any other changes. Once we had that set up in that index file, in that index Razor page, it just figures out everything else. It just says, goes out and says, you know, how do you want this stuff given to you? I can do it that way. And if you look at and hover over the details and delete, you'll see they still use the old way to do it, right? Now, if you want, you can go back into all the other pages and make that change. We won't do that right now. You can do that when you want to, when you get home. All you have to do is just make a copy of what we just did with that ID:int stuff and stick it at the page directive of the delete, or the details and the delete page. Don't put it on the create page because it doesn't make sense there, right? Because you're creating one, doesn't have an ID yet. Now the question comes in. If I go and hit edit on one of these guys, But let's edit when Harry met Sally. And we look at the top, we can see it says edit/1, right? What happens if there is no 1 there? Well, we get a 404 error because it needs to have a value because it's not set to null. It's not nullable. We can change that. We can make it nullable. And we can do that right now. The problem is the way this tutorial works is if you do that, what's going to happen is you're going to get the exact same error because inside the code it says, hey, if it's null, return a not found, which is going to return a 404. So you can do that, but if you want to see it actually work right, you have to put some breakpoints in to check it. But yes, you would just have to put in the question mark on the int line. So I will show you how that would work, even though it won't look like it works. You just put a question mark here. Sorry, go away. Like that. And that makes it nullable, and then it will pass a null in. Without that question mark, it never gets into the code behind page, right? It never gets into that CS file. With the question mark, it will get in the CS file, and it will check for nulls. All right? And if we go back to the edit.cs file, the edit.csh, the Razor, the code behind page, and we look down here, we do check for nulls right here. Side there, okay. And that's why it looks the same. So even though you put the question mark in there, you put nothing in there, it's going to come back with a 404. It took me about 15 minutes to find out why is it not working the way it should work. And it's because the way they wrote the code in here. So there you go. Any questions? Yes. Yep. Yes. Uh-huh. Well, you could, but we're not going to go through that right now. But basically, this is just saying use the this part here goes out and says what type of data do you have, and it knows that it's a date, so it gives you a drop down for the date. That's how that part works. It's all handled in that tag helper piece. If you want to make changes to it, go ahead. It's not what we're going to be doing today, though. But that's where the change would be. Well, you notice you just passing in ASP4, and it goes out and looks at the type of data that you're passing that you need to be passed back, and that's how it figures out some of this stuff. Yes. This is the easiest way, yes. As I said earlier, you can, the tag helpers can be, you can write your own tag helpers. If you need to write something that's specific for your stuff, that's perfectly valid. You can extend the input so that it's your ASP4 type of thing here. But that's the tag helper. You'd have to look at how that part works. We've gone over that in the past, but and you're more than welcome to go out and take a look and see how it works. All right. So just to go over this so we're completely clear on what's going on here, if we go back to the edit page CS file again for just a moment, there's this thing called bind property here. This is what allows us to pass that movie object around. Okay. So what happens is when it gets called, when you say, on get, it fills up that movie object and passes it down to the CSHTML file. And that CSHTML file then has it and can display the data. When it comes back on the post, which is a little farther down here, okay, first thing it does is does the model state is valid. So that checks to say, did you put in a valid date? Did you put in a numerical value for the price? That kind of stuff, right? Now, you could be saying, well, gee, I already did all those checks in the front end, and that's true, but if you're professional web developers, you're going to check both the front and back end, right? Because somebody could get in there and try and inject stuff into the stream, and that's never a good thing. So this just does a double check to say, hey, is my movie model correct? Is everything right? And if it is, then it goes in and says, all right, well, we want to make sure that we work with the context of our database, and we're going to say that we've modified our entity. And then we do a save changes and an async call to save the changes. And then this section here is to check, because we're doing things asynchronously, it's possible that somebody could make a change to a movie and somebody else could delete the movie at the same time. And we wouldn't necessarily know that. There could be some conflict as to when these things occur. So that update concurrency exception checks for that. This isn't as thorough as it could be. In fact, in the tutorial, they tell you how you should probably do it a little bit more thoroughly, but it's not really, it doesn't impact what we're showing today. So I'm going to pass on that. It's just a couple lines of code to check a little bit more thoroughly, that's all. So that's what happens. And then when it's done, it redirects to the index page. Simple enough, right? But this is the key to how this part works. Is this, if I could make the mouse scroll up, it's this bind property section. That's the glue that puts everything together. Now, for those of you who've worked with web forms, you know how this part works, right? What? Anybody have any ideas how this part works? It uses the view state to do all this stuff. So you're passing down a whole crap load of data down to the client, doing some changes, just passing all that stuff back up to the server, and that's why it was so slow and still is. This gets around that. So if you look at the view source of your pages, you won't see that that big view state. What you will see, because of the way that these tag helpers work, is that the form tag helper will automatically put in the validation string. So make sure that somebody's trying to hack the page kind of stuff. So that does get added in as well. All right. Questions about that? All right. So we are up to the last part of this, which is to add a search to our little Razor Pages application. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back to the index page, and we're going to make some changes to that. So there we go, index page. All right, so we want the index, the C# code for the index page. So index.cshtml.cs. And if you're looking at the tutorial, we are at the add search section, and you probably want to get there because we're going to be copying some code from there. Okay. So what you can see here is on the onGet portion, we're going to include a search string. We can search for things. And then we're going to run some link statements, and then we're going to return back whatever we end up with at the end. And we'll go over this in a little more detail in just a second. So what you want to do, everybody at the right spot here for the add search section of the tutorial? Yes? Yes. Copy this code. There's a little copy button up here. You can copy it. Go back to your index page. And it's the on get async in the index page. So just replace that whole thing with this part. Okay. And if you want to reformat your page, just it's Shift Alt F reformats, in case you're wondering how to do that. So let's look at this real quick. How many people have never seen link statements before? Good. So you can all tell me, at this point in time, on line, we'll say 27 or 28, doesn't matter which one, what is in movies? Popcorn? Okay. Anybody? Well, actually nothing yet. So what we get is, at this point, we're just creating this variable, but we haven't actually filled it with anything yet. It's empty. Aside from the request, right? Then we hit this if statement. We say, okay, if we have a search string, so if the search string is not empty, then we want to add a where clause to our movies variable. And after this line, do we have anything in movies? Still empty, right? It doesn't actually fill up until it hits this toList async line right here. So this does not hurt anything to sit here and build up this query in pieces because we haven't actually run anything yet. Yes. Correct. Yes, this is completely just, but you know, I'm trying to be thorough. Okay. So after this, we get our list of movies. And we pass in a search string to get that to happen. So we can just run this right now, and it should work, right? Now, here's something to remember, though. Let's save this. Let's save everything because I haven't saved everything yet. Let's make sure. Do a save all. And let's try running this. And this is the, helps if I stop it first, doesn't it? I could have. All right. So again, we're going to go into that movies. And if we just go to movies, it should work the same way it always did, right? Because search string is empty. So it goes through and it says, give me everything in the movies table. And there's no search string, so just return everything in the movies table. Okay. Now, if we were working with SQL Server, I could say, question mark, search string equals ghost, and get back some data. But we're not working with SQL Server. We're working with SQLite. So in our code, we have a contains clause, which is like a like clause in SQL. And in SQL Server, that's case insensitive. In SQLite, it's not. So just so you know that you haven't done anything wrong, you just need to use a capital G on ghost, because that's what it is. So this should work. right? Everybody see this working? Anybody not see this working? Okay. Now, we could, if we wanted to, do the same thing we did with the edit page, and we could put in a search string inside on our page directive, you know. So let me close this. Let me close this. We're not going to do this, but we could put up here, I'm on the index page, right? So I could put, you know, search string in here. Inside quotes, obviously, because I didn't type it in right, but you get the idea. I could do that. I could do that, and then I could just type in, instead of putting search string equals, I could just put in a search string. So movies/ghost, and it would go look it up. Okay. And that's fine, and that would work. We're not going to do that. Because that still requires the user to say, hey, I know I'm going to look for something, so I want to put it in the URL. It's kind of stupid for the user to have to modify the URL, just do a search, right? So we're going to add a field to our Razor page so that we can do a search. So if we go back over here, oh, that was stupid. Sorry. There we go. We go back over here to our tutorial. And there's some code down here that we want to copy. We just need to copy the stuff that's in yellow. You can see yellow on that, right? Yes? I'm always afraid when they put yellow on the screens because it doesn't always show up on projectors. So this little piece here, this little form section here, that's what we want to copy. And we want to put that inside our index page at that location. So let's copy that. Let me just get rid of this for a second. You guys don't do that. So it's going to go right after this ASP. Oops, I'm in the wrong place, aren't I? Oh, I'm in the right place. Right after this ASP page create line, after that paragraph, we want to put in that code, that form tag and the thing in there so that we can put in a title and do a search. So you can see what it's doing. It's setting up an input type. It's called search string. It's a submit. We're going to have a submit button, and we're going to call that filter. Now, because we called it search string, it knows that it's going to link it to search string in our code. So if we run this, everybody okay with this? Yes? Yeah, saving always helps. There is an autosave setting, yes, there is. So if I run this, Control F5, we should get our which wouldn't go down there, but it does. We go to our movies. We now have a new box here, right? Called title. if you put in ghost or something else and hit the filter button, it filters it to Ghostbusters. Isn't that wonderful? All right. Hit filter again, it removes it. Pretty straightforward. But it's all linked together based off that name, right? Because the form is passing into our onGet, that value inside the search string. And then it runs and returns back. Okay, so let's make it a little more complicated. And let's allow us to search by genre, but rather than have the person know what all the genres are, let's give them a list of genres. So we go down here a little bit in our tutorial. We can see what we're going to do is we're going to add two properties. One's called genres, which is a select list, and one is called movie genre, which is a string. Now, a select list is from the ASP.NET Core MVC rendering namespace. It will actually create a select list for us. So we want to take these two lines, okay, copy them into our code right underneath the iList movie. Our index.cs file. So here's the iList movie line. Right after that is where we want to put our two lines. And that really screwed that. Okay, good. All right, so you will have a red underline under select list because it needs a using clause. Okay. Again, click on that. You should get a little light bulb on the left. And if you click on the light bulb, it'll tell you, yes, use the using clause for Microsoft ASP.NET Core MVC rendering. That's what I want. And it'll put it in for you. It is this one. Okay. Go. Anybody else? No? All right, go back to the tutorial. There's a whole bunch of code we have to copy now. So we're going to change the onGetAsync again. And this time what we're going to do is we're going to create an iQueryable called genre query. We're going to do the same thing we did with the movies. And then we are going to fill up the genres with a select list, a new select list, and we're going to get distinct genres, right? That means we're only going to get one of each. So if you copy this whole section of code and replace the onGetSync, that's the easiest way to do it. onGetAsync, is that what I said? Yeah, onGetAsync. So that's right here, onGetAsync. All right, so that's the code we're going to replace inside our index.cshtml.cs. It takes longer to say that than it does to go there. and replace it with our new code. So really the two things we've added, we add this section here. We added a string into our signature called movie genre, and we fill in the genres with our select list, with our list of distinct genres. Now what we want to do is we want to add a select list to our CS.html file. So open that back up again. That would be the index.cshtml inside of our movies folder. And we're going to put it right before this, this search box for the title. And that code is again in the tutorial. It's these lines right here, the select section. And again, this is using tag helpers to figure out what it's supposed to do. So it makes life very easy when you're putting this code in. Copy that. And put it right after the paragraph mark, after the form. And this, I can never get the format correctly. I'll just do it that way. So these are the lines we've just added. And notice what we've done is we're getting our list of distinct genres, and then we're adding an option value of all. That's an empty string. That has a value of an empty string. So that when we run our code, if you specify all, it says there's nothing there for me to look for, so I'll just get everything. Right. And real quick, how's this actually work? The other thing that we've done is this line here is also added to say, hey, get that list of movies and add the extra where clause for the genre so that when you do the select, it only gets you back what you want. So this should work. And if we run it, and go to our page, there it is. So now we have a select list with our genres in it. And if I say I only want Westerns and hit filter, it only gives me Westerns. And if I say all and hit filter, it gives me everything. And if I say I want comedies, but I only want ones with a 2 in it, and it should filter it all the way down to there. There you go. The 2 would work either way. It is using both of them. If I said, give me Westerns with 2 in it, it should give me back nothing, right? And it does. There you go. Isn't that wonderful? Any questions? Again, all this stuff's happening. For the most part, the Razor Pages use extensively. They use tag helpers to get all their work done. And again, you can write your own tag helpers. The other interesting thing is the way that it handles routing, right? With that page directive, you can specify routing through that. Or a form of routing, I should say. Now, at this point, if you were to follow along in the tutorial anywhere beyond this point, you would have to switch back to using Visual Studio and use SQL Server. Because after this, that's required. And that has to do with the way that SQLite handles migrations. It does not do a very good job of handling migrations. So you'd have to completely blow away your SQLite database, recreate some things, do some stuff. It's a little bit of a pain. Or you can go in and modify the migrations by hand if you wanted to. But we're not going to do any of that stuff. But if you do want to follow along any farther than what we've just done, you'd have to go back and start over again with Visual Studio and SQL Server for the database. And that's as far as we can go. So any questions? It's pretty much the same thing you've been doing. There's nothing special about it, except for a couple neat little commands that are Razor specific. Yes. Yes, I know. You could do that, yes. I didn't want to complicate things. What he's saying is if you go into underneath .vs code, there's a launch.json, and it says what you're going to start up with. And yes, this one. Yes, that is correct. We don't want to confuse too many people, though. Yes. Yes. Okay. Any other questions or comments? Mm-hmm.
Oh, you forgot to say this year.
As Bill said, this year, it's a little more lightweight, I guess, than MVC. It also,
What was wrong?
I don't know. It does set you up though for Blazor. I don't know if that's why they're saying that or not, but
Blazor's not a real product.
it's not yet a real product.
There's nothing to see here.
So that's my guess. It is, like I said, it's a little. There's not as much ceremony about setting it all up.
But pay attention next week at Build to see what they're going to design.
Yes. Yes, do watch Build. I'm sure they broadcast most of it, and see what they're talking about when they talk about this stuff. I'm guessing you will see a demonstration of Blazor at Build, even though it's not a product. And you shouldn't use it for anything that's production. That's right. Yes. No, I mean, that's right. Razor Pages are their latest new thing, so that's why they want you to use it. I don't know. I mean, it's just I just think it's more lightweight. I think is really what it comes down to.
Well, I think MVC they got too much in the ceremony.
Yeah.
You had to have certain directories that had to link a certain way. If you look at all the other web development frameworks, stuff they do in other languages, Razor is open source.
So any other questions? Yes. Yes. Yeah, it's well, so the model that you pass in. So if we look at that index, I mean that is the model. That's it, right? So whatever you're going to pass in, that's what you're passing into. And in Razor Pages, it really is the entire class and all the pieces that go with it. If you know, the binding is where it sort of figures out that linking, or that bind part I showed you before in the C# stuff. That's where it's figuring out some of that stuff, where it's figuring out what it's really going to, send down and what you really can work with, and what it's going to send back. That two-way binding happens at that point. Well, you'd populate the model in the C# code. CS, yes, because they couldn't make it any longer than that. So yes, I mean that's basically your back end code. That's your server side code, is that C# stuff. It's code behind. Yes, you can call it that if you want to. I don't know if they'll be upset with you if you call it that, but that's essentially what's happening, right? Any other questions? That's all we have. We made it through the end. Yes, use that.
So I was going to say, we were talking about a little bit, I think we're starting to get towards organization a little bit. And I know there's an MVP who, on his GitHub repo, he specializes in clean architecture with ASP.NET Core. Because a lot of the times, I think, as you folks know, when you file a new project and then you actually do the work for a year, you wish that maybe you didn't use the file new project, right? So I think we'll try and get a link to that, both in the meetup event and also on the YouTube replay. So if you're checking out our replays there, just because like he goes to great lengths to take the next step and say, okay, you've learned the tutorial, you've gotten the t-shirt, but now you want to do a real production project. Let me save you the trouble of having done it wrong for the first year. And I'm pretty sure he's got Razor Pages samples too. I'll see if I can take a look for those.
Yeah, I mean, I would guess the Pages directory would get kind of complicated after a while if you weren't being careful. I could see that happening. You can stick it on the README file on the GitHub repo too. Yeah. All right.